Hello there, welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to our retro review of Streets of Rage 2. Released in 1992, 1 year after the original, this game had a lot to live up to, with Streets of Rage a massive hit. Axel and Blaze from the original Streets of Rage 1 are both back here again, and are joined by the oversized wrestler Max and the young kid Skate. Adam, however, who was a pretty popular character in the first one, is missing. However, he's not just completely vanished. His disappearance is integral to the storyline, and Skate is actually his younger brother, so he does remain in canon. So, a quick introduction to these games for anyone who hasn't played the original. You can go and check out the retro review to that, I'll throw the link down below. The Streets of Rage games are a side-scrolling combat game with pretty cool fighting scenes taking place across a variety of different environments. It follows the same mantra of walk along a little bit, get into a fight with some random enemies, and then you keep walking and continue your way through various different levels with an inevitable end of level boss at the end. Streets of Rage, the original, was a game that was really near and dear to my heart. I spent many hours playing it night after night round at my friend's house on his Sega Mega Drive. But Streets of Rage 2 was a game I only ever played in small bursts. I don't know why, I just never really found the opportunity to play it for any great deal of time. So going back and playing it for this review was a whole new experience, and had a fair few surprises. The combat system remains near identical, which is good. It's a style of game that doesn't really need tweaks. This is a mistake that games have made time and time again, trying to fix something that isn't broken, and I'm really glad to see that the creators of this game realised that simplistic gameplay suits this down to a T. The one downside in this was not so much a change to the controls, but removing something I really loved from the original. That being the option to call on a police car that launched a big missile strike that obliterated any villains on the screen, somehow miraculously saving you. This was something of an absence that did make me a bit sad because it was something I really enjoyed, but overall it's not a massive loss, and the game does include some slightly more realistic attacks, ones that help you eliminate multiple enemies and that are slightly more realistic than a nuclear strike that you somehow survive. So let's take a look at the rest of the game. Well, graphically, this is actually an improvement over the first one. The first graphics fit the game style just fine, but this time around, it really does feel that tiny bit more vivid, more colourful, and the scope of the villains on the screen has improved dramatically. In the first one, you'd often see the same bad guy attacking you over and over again, half the time on the screen at the same time. In this one, there's little minor tweaks to the villains. Yes, there is repetition and you will see that, but often you could have 4 people on the screen at the same time and they're usually going to all be slightly different. It may be the same model with just minor colour differences, but it's enough to make it feel clearly more varied. The environments are a little bit more lively as well. In one level, you can move between a few different settings, inside and outside buildings, and the environments do change a little bit as you work through them. It actually introduces angles as well, so it feels a little bit more 3D. You're not just going left to right, there are times when you're actually moving down the screen as well. It's a little minor improvement, but it does make it feel a bit more realistic. I wouldn't say the audio has really improved since the first one, but I don't think it necessarily needed to. The mix between music and grunting, punching sounds was just fine in the first one, and this does pretty much the same job, so it's all good. The one thing I have to admit I didn't really like in this game was the new characters. Axel, Blaze, they're fine, absolutely iconic, love them, but Max and Skate just feel like 2 walking gimmicks. The pro wrestler motif is clearly ripped off from Street Fighter 2 with Zangief, and he was one of my least favourite characters there, and you know I'm a wrestling fan. As for Skate, well, rolling around as some kid on rollerblades trying to look tough in a street fight? No, not for me. I'll stick with Axel and Blaze, that's fine. The other 2 characters, maybe others were more fond of them, but they weren't for me. So how was this game received on its release? Well, exceptionally. This game was considered, and to many still is considered, one of the greatest fighting games of all time. In the charts, it was often top of the charts for months, and the only two games that were consistently ahead of it were Super Mario Kart and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and that's some pretty stiff competition. It consistently got marks of the low 90%, and many even stated that it was substantially better than Street Fighter 2, which I consider a bit of a stretch, but it is a different type of fighting game, and I can understand where they're coming from. It's widely considered to be the best of the Streets of Rage series, and whilst the original game does have a bit more of a place in my heart, having played this in more depth now, I can't argue, it's definitely a better game. I haven't played the rest of them yet, but I'm going to, so we'll see where that goes. But what about Modern Scrutiny? Yeah, we love that one, don't we? What about now? How does this game hold up going and playing it now? Well, first of all, that statement. The statement that it's substantially better than Street Fighter 2. I'm sorry, that statement has been made to look pretty weak now. Street Fighter 2 and the games that followed it have been left with an incredible legacy, one that substantially dwarfs Streets of Rage. But if I'm honest, I think that was a bit of a dumb comment. No disrespect to whoever believes it, but the two games aren't comparable. It would be like saying WWE 2K22 is better than FIFA. Yes, they're both sports games, but they're not the same type. Really, the games this should be compared to are games like Golden Axe or Double Dragon, and this game absolutely dwarfs those both in popularity, success, and gameplay. Going back to most side-scrolling combat games, they feel pretty generic, but this one really stands out, and out of all of the 8-bit or 16-bit side-scrolling combat games I've played to date, the Streets of Rage series, and certainly Streets of Rage 2, certainly feel like the benchmark. This style of game, as I mentioned in my previous review for the original, has dated somewhat, and people just don't really play this type of game as much, but that doesn't mean they're not good, and it doesn't mean they're not enjoyable. This is the perfect retro pick up and play type game, and it's still just as much fun now as it was back then. It does appeal to a retro audience though, and I feel that modern gamers now would maybe find it a little bit repetitive, and that's where I think that 90% score just isn't going to hold up anymore. It doesn't mean it's not fun, it doesn't mean it's not good, but from a retro perspective looking back now, it's not where it was. But that's still not a bad thing. My retro review for Streets of Rage gave it 7 out of 10, and this is an improvement, so I'm going to say 7.5 out of 10. But what do you think? Comment below, let me know.